March 7, 1931, 11:23 p.m., South Wabash Avenue, Chicago. Elliot Ness stood in an empty warehouse, holding a Chinese parasol. Flashbulbs exploded around him. Pop, pop, pop. Each burst of light captured another angle of his humiliation. The reporters were laughing. Some weren't even trying to hide it. Behind Ness, 12 federal agents stood frozen, their shotguns still raised, their faces showing the exact moment they realized what had just happened. This warehouse was supposed to contain $2 million worth of bootleg whiskey, Al Capone's largest Southside brewing operation. 1,000 gallons of illegal beer produced every single day. The raid that would prove the federal government couldn't be bought. Instead, it contained parasols, Chinese umbrellas, wooden crates stamped with Hong Kong customs marks, legitimate dry goods from the Pacific Trading Company. The Chicago Tribune photographer moved in closer. Click. That would be tomorrow's front page. Crusader cop busts out. The image of the young federal agent, clean-cut and humiliated, holding evidence of his spectacular failure. What Ness didn't know, what he couldn't know as those flashbulbs captured his worst moment, was this: it wasn't a mistake. It was a trap. And it was about to get much, much worse. What the history books won't tell you is this: that single raid didn't just embarrass Elliot Ness. It gave Al Capone something he'd been hunting for 6 months. The complete list. Every name. Every face. All 12 federal agents that Ness trusted. The only 12 agents in Chicago that Capone couldn't buy. And Capone had exactly 30 days to destroy all of them. Not with bullets. Not with bribes. With something far more effective. With the system itself. By March 25th, 9 of those 12 agents would be gone. Suspended, transferred, investigated, careers obliterated, names poisoned, reputations destroyed so thoroughly that most would never work in law enforcement again. Good men, honest men, men who had done nothing wrong except stand behind Elliot Ness in that warehouse on March 7th. The parasol in Ness's hand cost $2.35. Al Capone spent $50,000 setting up this trap. 1,925 parasols worth. Best money he ever spent. To understand how one photograph and a warehouse full of umbrellas destroyed 12 federal careers, you need to understand what happened in the 6 weeks before that flashbulb popped. You need to understand who Elliot Ness was in January of 1931. January 15th, 1931. 9:37 a.m. Room 308. Transportation Building. 608 South Dearborn Street. Chicago. Elliot Ness was 27 years old, and he'd just been handed an impossible job. United States Attorney George E.Q. Johnson sat behind his desk, a file folder open in front of him. Inside that folder was a list, 12 names, 12 federal agents pulled from 6 different field offices across the country: Pennsylvania, South Carolina, Minnesota, Nebraska, New York, Montana. Operation Clean Sweep, Johnson said, sliding the folder across the desk. You'll lead it. Largest coordinated raid in Prohibition Bureau history. The mission is simple. Shut down Al Capone's Southside brewing operation in one night. Ness picked up the folder, studied the names. Joseph Leeson, surveillance expert from Minneapolis. Could tail a suspect for 3 days without being made. Paul Robsky, raid specialist from South Carolina. Claimed he'd run 30 bootleggers' cars off the road in a single month. Samuel Maurice Seeger, interrogations. Former death row corrections officer at Sing Sing. The kind of man who could stare down a killer and not blink. Martin Lahart. Ness's friend from his University of Chicago days. Solid, loyal, smart. Lyle Chapman, ex-Colgate football player turned investigator. 6'2", 220 pounds of enforcement. Warren Stutzman, former Pennsylvania State Police officer. 15 years experience. Clean record. Tom Friel, expert in wiretapping and telecommunications. Robert Sterling, document specialist, could spot a forged liquor license from across a room. Karl Hambach, evidence handling, meticulous, detail-oriented. Don Kuchen, described in his file as former trapper and expert shot, a man who knew how to track prey. William Gardner, Native American former athlete, football star at the Carlisle Indian School, named by Knute Rockne to his personal all-time All-America team. Ulrich Berard, youngest of the group, 24 years old, hungry to prove himself. 12 men, 12 different backgrounds. One thing in common: none of them had ever worked in Chicago. That was the point. In a city where an estimated 100 of the 300 federal prohibition agents were on Al Capone's payroll, trust was impossible. Every cop could be bought. Every agent could be compromised. Every tip could be a trap. So Johnson and Ness had done something radical. They'd gone outside the system, brought in agents who had no Chicago connections, no local ties, nobody in the city who could approach them with a bribe. These weren't just good agents. They were the only agents in the entire Chicago field office that Ness was certain couldn't be compromised. "You understand what we're up against," Johnson said. It wasn't a question. Ness understood. Chicago in 1931 was a city under siege. Al Capone controlled 20,000 speakeasies. He earned $100 million annually. That's the equivalent of $1.8 billion in today's money. He employed 1,000 gunmen. He owned judges, politicians, police chiefs. The Prohibition Bureau itself was rotted from the inside. Between 1920 and 1931, 1,587 out of 17,816 federal employees had been fired for corruption, lying on applications, perjury, robbery, bribery, embezzlement, contempt of court. The system designed to enforce the law had become as criminal as the men it was supposed to stop. And sitting at the top of that corrupt pyramid was Alphonse Gabriel Capone, Scarface, public enemy number one. President Herbert Hoover had given a personal directive: get Capone. Johnson was coordinating a two-pronged attack. Eliot Ness would hit Capone's operations, gather evidence of Volstead Act violations, disrupt his cash flow. Frank Wilson and the intelligence unit would follow the money, build a tax evasion case. This raid, Operation Clean Sweep, was Ness's proof of concept. Success meant expanded resources, more agents, real power to take down the entire Chicago outfit. Failure meant the operation would be disbanded before it even began. February 8th, 1931, 8:47 a.m. The Lexington Hotel, 22nd and Michigan Avenue. Al Capone sat behind a massive mahogany desk in Suite 203 through 205, smoking a Cuban cigar. Across from him sat Jake Guzik, the man they called Greasy Thumb, Capone's accountant and fixer, and Frank Nitti, stone-faced enforcer, the man who handled problems that couldn't be solved with ledgers. "We offered him $2,000 a week," Guzik said, flipping through a notebook. "That's $104,000 a year, more than most judges make." He said no. Capone exhaled smoke. "We tried intimidation, followed his wife, followed his family. The man doesn't scare. So we kill him," Nitti said simply. Capone shook his head. "Too much heat. President Hoover personally wants my head. We kill a federal agent, especially this Boy Scout. We bring the entire government down on us." "Then what?" Guzik asked. Capone leaned forward. "We can't buy Ness, but we can expose who he's chosen." The room went quiet. "He's building a team," Capone continued. "Agents from outside Chicago, men with no local connections, men we can't touch. Problem is, we don't know who they are. He's kept the list tight. So we make him show us," Nitti said, understanding dawning. "Exactly. We make him deploy his entire team. Then we destroy them. Not with bullets. With the system. We ruin their careers, their reputations. their ability to ever wear a badge again. Guzik was already writing. How? We give him a target he can't resist. A brewery. Big one. Perfect intelligence. Floor plans. Schedules. Everything. He plans his perfect raid. Brings his whole team. Except when he kicks down that door, there's nothing there. Just legitimate business. Parasols. Dry goods. Legal inventory. The press will crucify him, Guzik said. That's phase 1, the humiliation. But phase 2 is better. We use our people in the Treasury Department to launch an internal investigation. How did this intelligence failure happen? Someone on his team must have tipped us off. Suddenly, every one of his agents is under suspicion. Phase 3, Nitti said. We feed the investigation. Anonymous tips. Planted evidence. Make it look like his agents are dirty. Not all of them, Capone said. Just enough. 6, 7, maybe 9. Rest will quit on their own when they realize working with Ness is career suicide. Guzik was calculating costs. This won't be cheap. How much? 50,000 to set it up. Maintain the illusion. Keep the warehouse operating like a brewery without actually brewing. Pay off the right people to plant the tip where Ness will find it. $50,000. The equivalent of $925,000 in today's money. Do it, Capone said. What Elliot Ness didn't know, what he couldn't know as he planned his perfect raid throughout February, was this. While his team watched the South Wabash warehouse, Capone's people were watching them. Every agent identified, every face photographed, every background investigated. Jake Guzik compiled what he called the complete list. 12 names, 12 targets. The warehouse on South Wabash was real. It had been a brewery. But 2 weeks before the tip was delivered to Ness, Capone moved the operation. Brewing equipment dismantled, vats emptied, barrels shipped out in the middle of the night, replaced with legitimate inventory, Chinese parasols from the Pacific Trading Company, business licenses, customs documents, everything legal. But the theater continued. Trucks still arrived on schedule. Workers still showed up for shifts. Capone even had his people pipe in the smell of yeast from a neighboring bakery. Cost him $50,000 to maintain the illusion. Best investment he ever made. February 24th, Ness's apartment on the north side. Martin Lahart sat across from Ness, reviewing the raid plans for the 5th time. These 12 men are going to change Chicago, Ness said. Nobody can touch them. The title Untouchables hadn't been coined yet. That would come later, after Ness publicly refused a bribe in May. For now, they were just Ness's squad. 12 clean agents in a dirty city. March 7th, 6:15 a.m. Ness gathered his team for the final briefing, synchronized their watches, reviewed the floor plans one last time. Gentlemen, Ness said, tonight we prove the federal government cannot be bought. Across town, in his suite at the Lexington, Al Capone stubbed out his cigar. Tonight, he said to Nitti, we prove everyone can be ruined. 11 p.m. approached. The raid vehicles rolled out, Ness in the lead car with Lahart and Leeson. Behind them, a 10-ton truck with a steel battering ram mounted to the front. Behind that, more agents. Behind them, 3 cars full of reporters and photographers. The convoy moved through Chicago's dark streets toward South Wabash Avenue, toward a warehouse full of parasols, toward the trap. March 7th, 1931, 11 p.m., South Wabash Avenue. The 10-ton truck hit the warehouse doors at 40 miles per hour. The steel battering ram mounted to the front did its job. Wood splintered. Metal hinges shrieked. The double doors exploded inward. Ness was out of the lead car before the truck stopped moving. Shotgun in his hands, Lahart and Leeson right behind him. The rest of the team poured through the breach. 12 federal agents, weapons raised, ready for a fight. Federal agents, nobody move. Ness's voice echoed through the cavernous space. The warehouse was 10,000 square feet, high ceilings. Rows of wooden crates stacked 20 feet high, industrial lighting casting harsh shadows, and it was almost empty. 3 workers stood near a loading dock, hands already raised. No resistance, no scramble to escape, no desperate attempts to destroy evidence. They surrendered immediately, faces showing exaggerated fear that looked almost rehearsed. Too easy. Chapman moved to the nearest crate, pried it open with a crowbar. The wood cracked. The lid came off. Inside Chinese parasols, waxed paper, wooden handles, hand-painted designs. What on earth? Chapman muttered. Ness felt ice form in his stomach. Open another one. Robsky attacked a second crate. More parasols. Red ones this time. All of them, Ness ordered. Open every crate in this building. For the next 8 minutes, 12 federal agents became movers. Crowbars worked. Lids flew. Crate after crate revealed the same thing. Parasols, umbrellas, dry goods, silk fabric, legitimate inventory. Where there should have been copper vats and brewing equipment, there was nothing but empty concrete floor. Clean. Recently scrubbed. The yeasty smell that had confirmed this was a brewery. Ness traced it to ventilation ducts, connected to the bakery next door. One of the workers approached. Small man. Nervous. Holding papers. Sir, this is just the Pacific Trading Company. We import parasols from Hong Kong. He showed Ness a business license, dated 6 months earlier. Official stamps. City of Chicago. State of Illinois. Completely legal. Cargo manifests. Customs documents. Import records. Everything legitimate. Behind Ness, flashbulbs started popping. The press had arrived. They rushed in through the broken doors. Cameras up. Notebooks out. Hungry for the story they'd been promised. The big raid. The federal takedown of Capone's operation. Instead, they found Elliot Ness standing in the middle of an empty warehouse, holding a Chinese parasol. Mr. Ness, a reporter from the Tribune. Is this the dangerous bootlegging equipment you were after? Another voice. Are parasols illegal now? Laughter rippled through the press corps. Not cruel. Not yet. Just confused amusement. Ness looked at his 12 agents. They stood scattered around the warehouse, surrounded by opened crates, faces showing the exact moment they realized what had happened. Martin Lahart stepped close, spoke quietly. Elliot, we were set up. But it was too late. The photographers were already circling, finding angles, capturing every detail of the failure. Tomorrow's front page was being shot in real time. Across town. The phone rang in Suite 203 of the Lexington Hotel. Capone picked up, listened, smiled. It's done. All 12 agents confirmed. He hung up, lit a fresh cigar, pulled a folder from his desk drawer. Inside photographs. 12 faces. 12 names. The complete list. Capone looked at Guzik and Nitti. Gentlemen, he said, exhaling smoke. Phase 2 begins tomorrow morning. March 8th, 1931, morning edition. The Chicago Tribune ran the photograph front page. Elliot Ness holding a Chinese parasol. The headline, Crusader Cop Busts Out. The New York Times picked it up. Chicago Raid, Fiasco. Federal agents seize Chinese parasols in bootlegging bust. By noon, Ness was in Prohibition Bureau Director Malachi Harney's office. Elliot, what on earth happened? We were fed bad intelligence. Someone inside the department. No, the intelligence came from your wiretaps, your surveillance. This failure is yours. That afternoon, Internal Affairs announced an investigation, not into who provided the bad intelligence, into how Ness selected his team of 12 agents. The implication was clear. If the intelligence came from Ness's operation and the operation failed, someone on his team must have tipped Capone off. That's impossible, Ness protested. I vetted each man personally. The IA director leaned forward. Then explain how Al Capone knew exactly when and where you'd raid. March 9th. The anonymous letters started arriving at the Treasury Department. Agent Robert Sterling has been seen dining at the Bella Napoli Cafe. known Capone establishment. Agent William Gardner photographed at Hawthorne Racetrack. Possible gambling problem. Agent Carl Hambach has a brother-in-law with documented connections to the Chicago outfit. Each letter targeted one of the 12. The evidence was circumstantial, but it was damaging. March 11th. Robert Sterling was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. "I've never taken a bribe in my life," he shouted. Didn't matter. The investigation would take months. His career was stalled, maybe permanently. Over the next 10 days, 5 more agents were suspended or transferred. Paul Robsky reassigned to Montana, effectively exiled. Carl Hambach under investigation for irregularities in evidence handling. Warren Stutzman accused by an anonymous witness of accepting an envelope of cash. Each accusation was false. Each was impossible to quickly disprove. Each agent's career was derailed. By March 20th, 3 more agents requested transfers, not because they were corrupt, because they were afraid. Working with Ness had become career suicide. March 25th. 9 of the 12 agents were either suspended, under investigation, or transferred. Only 3 remained. Martin Lahart, Joseph Leeson, Lyle Chapman. They stayed, but they were demoralized. The untouchables concept was destroyed before it ever really existed. March 27th. Ness sat in U.S. Attorney George E.Q. Johnson's office. "Elliot, I fought to get you this assignment. I believed in you. We were set up. Everything about that warehouse was designed to, I know, which makes it worse. Al Capone outplayed you. He identified your entire team, destroyed their reputations, made you look incompetent, all without firing a single shot." Johnson slid a file across the desk. Inside intelligence from Frank Wilson's tax investigation. Evidence that the anonymous tip about the South Wabash warehouse was planted. Evidence of Capone's counter-surveillance operation. Evidence of the planted accusations against the agents. "This proves Capone set you up," Johnson said. "But we can't use it publicly. It came from an illegal wiretap. So Capone wins. In this battle. But there's still the war. Frank Wilson is close to building a tax case. I need you to keep hitting Capone's operations. But this time, quietly. No press. No big teams. You, Lahart, and Leeson. That's it." Ness walked out of Johnson's office. In the hallway, 3 of his former agents waited. Sterling, Stutzman, Gardner. "Elliot, they cleared me," Sterling said. "But I'm done. I can't work for the Bureau anymore. My name is poisoned." All 3 shook his hand. Then they left. Ness stood alone in that hallway. March 27th, 1931. The day Elliot Ness learned the hardest lesson of his career. Sometimes the strongest weapon isn't a gun or a badge. It's reputation. And Al Capone just taught him how to destroy it. What happened next changed everything. April 1931. Ness rebuilt. Operating with only Lahart and Leeson. Smaller raids. Quieter operations. No press announcements. Learning from his mistake. Building cases slowly, methodically. The famous Untouchables name came later, in May, after Ness publicly refused a $2,000 per week bribe. But by then, he was operating with a skeleton crew, 3 men instead of 12, the 12 agents. Where they went. Robert Sterling, cleared of all charges, June 1931, resigned, became a private investigator in St. Louis. William Gardner, cleared but transferred to rural Montana outpost, quit within a year. Warren Stutzman, cleared after 8-month investigation, never trusted with major cases again, retired early. Carl Hambach, stayed with Bureau but sidelined, became a clerk. Ulrich Berard, cleared but psychologically broken by the investigation, took medical leave, never returned. Don Kuchen, transferred to Cincinnati, eventually left federal service. Tom Friel, never officially fired, but remained under investigation for 2 years. Evidence was fabricated, but he couldn't prove it. Left government service 1933. 3 suspended permanently. Careers destroyed. Names forgotten. 3 survived. Lahart, Leeson, Chapman. They became the core of what history remembers as the untouchables. 9 casualties. 9 good men. 9 honest men whose only crime was being chosen by Elliot Ness.